The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
In this video, I will be reading one of the stories from George R. R. Martin's most recent book, Fire and Blood. As you all know, HBO is working on a new show, House of the Dragon, which is based on what is written in this book. Unfortunately, I don't think we will see this character in the new show because she died long before any of the events surrounding the Dance of Dragons. Since I know a lot of you haven't read any of the books, you might not be that familiar with this character. How she dies has to be one of the most horrific ways to die in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. What exactly happened to Aerea Targaryen is still a mystery till this day. There are many different theories about her death, so I want to read what it says in Fire and Blood, then at the end of the video, let me know what you think down below. I highly recommend watching the entire video because what it says about Balerion the Black Dread is actually kind of frightening when you think about it. This is what it says about the day Aerea Targaryen arrived back in King's Landing. Everyone remembers what they were doing when they heard the blast of a horn ringing through the morning air. The sound of it ran down my spine like a cold knife, the Queen would say later, though I could not have said why. In a lonely watchtower overlooking the waters of Blackwater Bay, a guard had glimpsed dark wings in the distance and sounded the alarm. He sounded the horn again, as the wings grew larger, and a third time when he saw the dragon plane, black against the clouds. Balerion had returned to King's Landing. It had been long years since the Black Dread had last been seen in the skies above the city, and the sight filled many a King's Lander with dread, wondering if somehow Maegor the Cruel had returned from beyond the grave to mount him once again. Alas, the rider hanging onto his neck was not a dead king, but a dying child. Balerion's shadow swept across the yards and halls of the Red Keep as he came down, his huge wings buffeting the air, to land in the inner yard by Maegor's holdfast. Scarcely had he touched the ground than Princess Aerea slid from his back. Even those who had known her best during her years at court scarce recognized the girl. She was near enough to naked as to make no matter, her clothing no more than rags stuck to her arms and legs. Her hair was tangled and matted, her limbs as thin as sticks. "Please!" she cried to the knights and squires and serving men who had seen her descend. Then, as they came rushing toward her, she said, "I never," and collapsed. Sir Lucamore Strong had been at his post on the bridge across the dry moat surrounding Maegor's holdfast. Shoving aside the other onlookers, he lifted the princess in his arms and carried her across the castle to Grand Maester Bennifer. Later, he would tell anyone who would listen that the girl was flushed and burning with fever, her skin so hot he could feel it even through the enameled scale of his armor. She had blood in her eyes as well, the knight claimed, and there was something inside her, something moving that made her shudder in my arms. He did not tell those tales for long though. The next day, King Jaehaerys sent for him and commanded him to speak no more of the princess. The king and queen were sent for at once, but when they reached the maester's chambers, Bennifer denied them entry. "You do not want to see her like this," he told them, "and I would be remiss if I allowed you any closer." There were guards posted at the door to keep servants away as well. Only Septon Barth was admitted, to administer the rites for the dying. Bennifer did what he could for the stricken princess, giving her milk of the poppy and immersing her in a tub of ice to bring her fever down, but his efforts were to no avail. The sun had set and the hour of the bat was at hand when Barth emerged to announce that Aerea Targaryen was dead. The princess was consigned to the flames the very next day at sunrise, her body wrapped in fine white linen from head to toe. Grand Maester Bennifer, who had prepared her for the funeral pyre, looked half dead himself. The king announced that his niece had died of a fever and asked the realm to pray for her. King's Landing mourned for a few days before life resumed as before, and that was the end of it. Mysteries remained, however. Even now, centuries later, we are no closer to knowing the truth. More than 40 men have served the Iron Throne as Grand Maester. Their journals, letters, account books, memoirs, and court calendars are our single best record of the events they witnessed. But not all of them are equally diligent. Whereas some left us volumes of letters full of empty words, never failing to note what the king ate for supper and whether he enjoyed it, others set down no more than a half-dozen missives a year. In this regard, Bennifer ranks near the top, and his letters and journals provide us with detailed accounts of all that he saw, did, and witnessed while in service to King Jaehaerys and his uncle Maegor before him. And yet in all of Bennifer's writings there is not a single word to be found concerning the return of Aerea Targaryen and her stolen dragon to King's Landing, nor the death of the young princess. Fortunately, Septon Barth was not so reserved, and it is to his own account we must now turn. The Septon wrote, "It has been 3 days since the princess perished, and I have not slept. I do not know that I shall ever sleep again. The mother is merciful, I have always believed, and the Father above judges each man justly. But there is no mercy and no justice in what befell our young princess. How could the gods be so blind or so uncaring as to allow such horror? I do not know. I do not want to know. If this makes me a faithless Septon, then so be it. Grand Maester Bennifer and I have agreed to tell no one at all of what we saw and experienced in his chambers as that child lay dying. Not the king, nor the queen, nor her mother, nor even the archmaesters of the citadel. But the memories will not leave me, so I shall set them down here. Mayhaps by the time they are found and read, men will have gained a better understanding of such evils. We have told the world that Princess Aerea died of a fever, and that is broadly true, but it was a fever such as I have never seen before and hope never to see again. The girl was burning. Her skin was flushed and red, and when I laid my hand upon her brow to learn how hot she was, it was as if I had thrust it into boiling oil. There was scarce an ounce of flesh upon her bones, so gaunt and starved did she appear, but we could observe certain swellings inside her, as her skin bulged out and then sunk down again, as if... No, not as if, for this was the truth of it. There were things inside her, living things that were moving, mayhaps searching for a way out, and giving her such pain that even milk of the poppy gave her no relief. We told the king, as we must surely tell her mother, that Aerea never spoke, but that is a lie. I hope that I shall soon forget some of the things she whispered through her cracked and bleeding lips. I cannot forget how often she begged for death. All the maester's arts were worthless against her fever, if indeed we can call such a horror by such a commonplace name. The simplest way to say it is that the child was cooking from within. Her flesh grew darker and darker and then began to crack, until her skin resembled nothing so much, 7 save me, as pork cracklings. Smoke issued from her mouth, her nose, even, most obscenely, from her nether lips, or I should say, her lips down below. By then she ceased to speak, though the things within her continued to move. Her very eyes cooked within her skull and finally burst, like 2 eggs that were left in a pot of boiling water for far too long. I thought that was the most hideous thing that I should ever see, but I was quickly disabused of that notion, for a worse horror that was awaiting me. That came when Bennifer and I lowered the child into a tub and covered her with ice. The shock of that immersion stopped her heart at once, I tell myself. If so, that was a mercy, for that was when the things inside her came out. Mother have mercy, I do not know how to speak of them. They were worms with faces, snakes with hands, slimy, unspeakable things that seemed to squirm as they came bursting from her flesh. Some of them were no bigger than my little finger, but one was at least as long as my arm. They died though. I must remember that. Hold on to that. Whatever they might have been, they were creatures of heat and fire, and they did not love the ice, oh no. One after another, they thrashed and died before my eyes, thank the 7. I will not presume to give them names. They were horrors. The first part of Septon Barth's accounts ends here, but some days later, he returned and resumed. Aerea Targaryen is gone, but not forgotten. The faithful pray for her sweet soul every morn and every night. Outside the Septs, the same questions are on every lip. The princess was missing for more than a year. Where could she have gone? What could have happened to her? What brought her home? Was Balerion the monster believed to haunt the velvet hills of Andolus? Could the Black Dread have flown as far as Astapor to be the dragon in the pit? No, and no, and no. These are fables. If we set aside such distractions, however, the mystery remains. Where did Aerea Targaryen go after fleeing Dragonstone? Queen Rhaena's first thought was that she had flown to King's Landing. When that proved wrong, Rhaena next looked to the Fair Isle and Old Town. Both made sense after a fashion, but Aerea was not to be found at either location, nor anywhere in Westeros. Others, including the Queen and myself, took this to mean that the princess had flown east, not west, and would be found somewhere in Essos. The girl might well have thought the free cities to be beyond her mother's grasp, and Queen Alysanne in particular seemed convinced that Aerea was fleeing her mother as much as Dragonstone itself. Yet Lord Rhaego's agents and informers could find no hint of her across the narrow sea, nor even a whisper of her dragon. Why? Though I can offer no certain evidence, I can suggest an answer. It seems to me that we all have been asking the wrong question. Aerea Targaryen was still well shy of her 13th name day on the morning she slipped from her mother's castle. Though she was no stranger to dragons, she had never ridden one before, and for reasons we may never understand, she chose Balerion as her mount, instead of any of the younger and more tractable dragons she might have claimed. As driven as she was by her conflicts with her mother, mayhaps she simply wanted a beast larger and more fearsome than Queen Rhaena's Dreamfire. It might have also been a desire to mount the beast that had slain her father and his own dragon, though Aerea had never known her father, and it is hard to know what feelings she might have had about him and his death. Regardless of her reasons, the choice was made. She might well have intended to fly to King's Landing just as her mother suspected. It might have been her thought to seek out her sister in Old Town, or to go seeking after Lady Alyssa Farman, who had once promised to take her adventuring. Whatever her plans were, they did not matter. It is one thing to leap upon a dragon, and quite another to bend him to your will, especially a beast as old and fierce as the Black Dread. From the very start, we have asked, where did Aerea take Balerion? What we should have been asking was, where did Balerion take Aerea? Only one answer makes sense. Recall, if you will, that Balerion was the largest and oldest of the three dragons that King Aegon and his sisters rode to conquest. Vhagar and Meraxes had hatched on Dragonstone. Balerion alone had come to the island with Aenar the Exile and Daenys the Dreamer, the youngest of the 5 dragons they brought with them. The older dragons had died during the intervening years, but Balerion lived on, growing ever larger, fiercer, and more willful. If we discount the tales of certain sorcerers and mountebanks, as we should, he is mayhaps the only living creature in the world that knew Valyria before the Doom. And that is where he flew the child who was desperately trying to hold on to his back. What befell her on Valyria I cannot surmise. Judging from the condition in which she returned to us, I do not even care to contemplate it. The Valyrians were more than dragon lords. They practiced blood magic and other dark arts as well, delving deep into the earth for secrets best left buried. For these sins, the gods in their wrath struck them down. Valyria is accursed, all men agree, and even the boldest sailor steers well clear of its smoking bones. But we would be mistaken to believe that nothing lives there now. The things we found inside Aerea Targaryen live there now, I would submit, along with such other horrors as we cannot even begin to imagine. I have written here at length of how the princess died, but there is something else, something even more frightening, that requires mention. Balerion the Black Dread has wounds as well. That enormous beast, the Black Dread, the most fearsome dragon ever to soar through the skies of Westeros, returned to King's Landing with half-healed scars that no man recalled ever having seen before, and a jagged rent down his left side almost 9 feet long, a gaping red wound from which his blood still dripped, hot and smoking. The Lords of Westeros are proud men, and the Septons of the Faith and the Maesters of the Citadel in their own ways are prouder still. But there is much and more of the nature of the world that we do not understand, and may never understand. The Father made men curious, some say to test our faith. It is my own abiding sin that whenever I come upon a door, I must needs see what lies upon the farther side. But certain doors are best left unopened. Aerea Targaryen went through such a door. Septon Barth's account ends here. He would never again mention the fate of Aerea Targaryen in any of his writings, and even these words would be sealed away to remain undiscovered for almost 100 years. So, what do you think happened to Aerea Targaryen and even Balerion the Black Dread? Did something attack them? Was she infected by some disease? Does it have anything to do with blood magic? Leave me your thoughts down below, and as always, I want to thank everyone for watching the video. Have a great day, everyone. I will see you again very soon. Bye.